Good morning, you two.
Good morning.
Ooh, I got a response. I'm so lucky. Thanks, Jennifer. That's fine, yeah. I'm like, hopefully we get more than 2.
You can start whenever.
Okay.
They'll just join in later.
Sounds like a them problem. Okay, I'll start by talking. So, ooh, as more people join us, yay. So, good morning, you guys. We're gonna be starting kind of a little bit of a bigger project, which I'm excited about. I hope you guys are excited about it too. And let's see if I have an example over here. Ooh, as I knock everything over. So I know this is gonna be overwhelming showing you the final project. Don't freak out, I'm gonna take it step by step. But we're gonna be doing fun little landscapes using our watercolors. Very excited. So that's a lot. Today we're just gonna start with some of our basic steps. We're gonna start by blocking things out on our paper, making sure we have our paper, and then starting with our wash. We'll get there, I'll show you guys. So, you wanna make sure you start by grabbing your watercolor paper. I don't know the size of it. It's like a...
It's 6 by 18.
6 by 18. Nice, long, and thin. And our first step is going to be blocking off the sides, which you might not be able to do. I don't know how many of you guys have masking tape at home, but if you have it, I would love it if you would go grab your masking tape now. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna add a little bit of a border to our piece. It gives it a little bit of a finished look and kind of helps it from looking kind of messy. But if you don't have masking tape, don't worry about it, it's fine. It's just, it's not necessary, it's just something that adds a little bit of class. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding my masking tape to the edge of my paper, and I have inch wide masking tape, and I'm adding half of it on and half of it off, about. So I'm gonna end up with about a 1/2 inch border around my whole piece. Is it the long skinny paper? Yeah, it is. So now I'm gonna do the same thing up here, which you probably can't see, but that's okay. I'm gonna do it to the sides too. Taking that masking tape, half on, half off. As I also get it everywhere. Okay. So then there's my masking tape. About half on, about half off. It definitely does not have to be perfect. Like, you're not gonna get graded on how well you can put masking tape on a paper, don't worry. Let's see, that's probably long enough. There. Okay, so I put masking tape on all 4 sides, half on, half off. So now I'm gonna have this little 1/2 inch border that'll stay white. That way when I'm done with my project, I can peel it off and it'll have almost like a frame around it. So once you guys are done with that, we're going to be making kind of the centerpiece of our landscape. We're gonna be doing either a sun or a moon, and you're gonna be doing it in a resist. So if we go back to our techniques, our resists are white crayon, masking tape, rubber cement, those sorts of things. Anything that'll kind of repel the water so you don't get the pigment in the paper. So, what we're gonna do is we're going to draw our sun or moon, and we want something that's a circle, and you might not be able to make a perfect circle. That's fine. Ideally, you would use like a compass, or you would use, I don't know, like I'm just gonna trace the inside of my masking tape. You could free draw it if you had to, that's fine too. But using something that is circular like that kind of adds a little bit of extra touch. It makes it look a little bit more professional, a little bit more finished. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our circular object, or we're gonna free draw, or we're gonna trace something, who knows. And we're gonna place it in our landscape. But what we don't wanna do, we don't wanna put it directly in the middle. When you put it directly in the middle, you kind of lose a little bit of interest. Like, it's a little bit predictable. So you kind of want to either take your circle and move it maybe near the top. You could have the moon and then do like a nice night scene. You could do it somewhere near the bottom. You could do like a setting or rising sun. You can put it pretty much anywhere as long as you're not putting it smack in the middle. So doesn't matter how big the circle is. Not really, but you don't want it to be super small because this is kind of our centerpiece or focal point, if that makes sense. So like I could either trace the inside or outside of this, and it doesn't really matter. Like I did a little example at home on this little piece of paper, and my moon was pretty small in comparison to the rest of my drawing. So as long as you get a relatively decent size that can kind of make sense as the focal point, that's all that really matters. So I'm going to place mine somewhere near the top. Doesn't have to be near the top, could be near the bottom. And I'm gonna trace, I'm gonna do the inside of my masking tape. I'm using pencil, I'm using it very lightly, because if I'm doing it lightly and I don't get the resist over it, I can later kind of wash it away or erase it. So next what we're doing, once you have your circle drawn, is you're going to put some sort of resist over it. This could be like a white crayon. You could take a white crayon and just kind of scrub it in there. You could take your masking tape and kind of tape off this circle. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the rubber cement. Since I'm using rubber cement, I'm gonna try and make it a really thin layer. That way it can dry. So an advantage to using either the masking tape or the crayon is that you don't have that kind of awkward drying time. So I'm gonna quickly try and smooth that out really thin. I'm gonna try and take some of it off because it was a little thick. That's not bad. It might not quite be a perfect circle. I'm trying my best. An advantage to the masking tape is you can kind of see where your circle will be, versus with the rubber cement and with the crayon, they're both kind of clear. So it's a little difficult to see exactly what you have covered and what you haven't. I'm gonna add a little more to one part because I don't quite think I got it. But like I said, I can't really tell. Yeah, that looks good. Good enough. Trying to take away some of that glob in the middle. Okay. So, either once you've finished using your crayon and coloring in your sun or moon, or you taped it off, or you used rubber cement, any sort of resist, we're gonna kind of plan ahead with what we're going to do. Because if you don't plan ahead, you might have some issues and it might be a little bit difficult. So, we want to plan out both if we're going to use wet on wet techniques, what those wet on wet techniques are going to be, and then we also have to plan out what colors we're going to use. Because by the time we start our wash, we kind of want to finish everything while it's still wet or on the wetter side, because I know some of the wet on wet techniques won't work on dry paint. So I'm going to do, let's see, for my wet on wet techniques, I think I'm gonna use some salt, because I think I'm gonna do a moon, because I'm a fan of cooler colors and they kind of go together. And then I think I'm also gonna use some isopropyl alcohol to make bigger kind of blooms, or almost kind of bigger stars or something in the night sky. And I don't know, I might use, let's see, I might use my magic eraser and try and take some stuff out in places. It's honestly just kind of a little bit of an experiment to see what you want to do. It's mostly just kind of adding some sort of texture or some sort of intrigue to your plain flat wash. So what we're doing next is we want to choose our colors. For our colors, you have to use one of the color schemes you've already talked about. So that could be monochromatic, complementary, triad, warm, cool, analogous. You have to use one of those color schemes, because this is kind of showing that you learned something from all those worksheets. So I think I'm going to use, I don't know, I'm gonna use probably the warm colors, or I mean the cool colors. So I'm gonna use my purple, my blue, my green, and some sort of combination with those. So like I said before, with your wet on wet techniques, you wanna plan ahead with your colors too. You don't wanna get to the point, like if you're mixing like a red orange, you don't wanna mix it and then paint it and then try and mix another color as this one dries, because it's a lot easier to work in making a gradient if everything stays a little bit wet. So I'm just gonna do, let's see, I think I'm gonna do a purple in one part of my palette. So add some water in there, add some pigment. So then I have a little bit of this, maybe not a little bit, maybe I want a lot of it, of that pure purple. So then I'm gonna mix, I think in my next one I'm gonna mix some purple and some blue together. That way I have sort of in between shades. I think it'll be easier if I don't just do purple, blue, and green on my paper, but mixing sort of these transition shades will be a little bit easier. And you can mix up these transition shades with kind of whatever color scheme you're doing. Maybe not so much monochrome. Monochrome, like if you're doing a monochromatic color scheme, you just kind of add more water to your pigment as you go to kind of lighten it up. So let's see, wash my brush out. I'm gonna add a little bit of purple to that blue. Because there I'm getting kind of an indigo color. And then I'm gonna do blue and green. Or no, I'm gonna do just blue, and then I'm gonna do blue and green. You do not have to be doing these colors at all. If you wanna make it a sun scene, it might make more sense to use kind of warmer colors. Or you could do like, I don't know, really whatever you want, as long as it's something that we've talked about in class. Let's do blue. Let's do green. color, getting pigment, mixing it in my palette. I know this part might seem kind of boring because we're not really painting yet, but I promise it'll make everything a lot easier for you. More green. And then I'm gonna mix a little bit of blue-green too. Green. When I'm mixing those, I'm putting the lighter color in first, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of the darker color to it. Putting green, putting green. Actually, I think I'm gonna make that one my pure green. That way I can kind of follow this, oh, as I spill it on my paper. That's okay. Let me take a paper towel. Since I spilled some of my green over here, dab it up a little bit. It might still leave some residue. That's okay. I'm still gonna be painting. And then since we're gonna be doing landscapes on top of it, I'll have plenty of chances to cover up my mistakes. Green, more green. And then I'm gonna go in and add blue to one of my greens. Another advantage to mixing up your colors now is that you also are giving yourself time for your resist to dry, which may not, which isn't an issue if you're using masking tape or if you're using white crayon, but since I am using that rubber cement, I do want to give it time to dry because I don't want to just be mixing my paint all up in there. Okay. So like I said, we want to make sure we have a lot of almost front loading of this project. We want to make sure we can get as much done at the beginning as we can. That way we can just work straight through our gradient and straight through our techniques. Okay. So, I don't know how well you can see it, but those are the colors I mixed up. So I took all the cool colors and did a little bit of mixing in there. And then, let's see, is that dry? Still a little tacky, so I'm gonna avoid going in the middle as much as I can, but that's okay. So I'm going to start with my purple, and then I'm gonna go to my mix, blue, blue, green, green. So let's get our brush wet, grab some purple, and I'm just gonna start going. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna put this purple, and I'm gonna kind of go down a little bit past where I actually want my purple to go. And then I'm going to take my next color, go down, and then kind of go up to blend them together. So, let's see. Also might just go until I run out of purple. That'll work too. You also want to make sure that you are going, not necessarily over the edge of the masking tape, but you want to make sure you are going up to the edge of the masking tape, because that'll help in giving you that nice border when you peel the tape off. So there's my purple. Next, I'm going to take my mixture of blue and purple, and I'm going to start a little bit lower, and then I'm going to push it up and then mix them where I already put the purple down. So I'm going to start right here. Something that's really beneficial to using the watercolor too is that if you ultimately don't quite like how something turns out, like for example, I think my purple is pretty light, I can always go back in with a glaze and kind of put a layer of purple back over that purple. Then I'm going to take a kind of clean brush and maybe clean up right up here to blend that gradient out. Okay, so next I'm going to be taking my, what's next? Pure blue. Going from the palette, going onto the paper. It is a little bit difficult since the brushes are so small, but that's okay. I also don't want you guys to freak out if your gradients or your techniques that we'll be using in a bit don't turn out exactly as planned. You are going to be adding a landscape over this, so you can kind of cover up any of your mistakes. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. I'm going to bring that blue down a little bit further. I'm kind of making the majority of my painting this kind of blue color. You can do whatever you want. So I have this blue wash down here. Next I'm going to go into my blue-green. I'm going to clean the brush off, grab the paint, start going. And there you can see where I dropped the green onto my paper. That's okay. I'm going to cover it up more later. I push it into the blue. I'm going to go back, get a little water, blend them out by kind of going back and forth from going into the blue to kind of into this green and back again. Something that's happening here is my paper is getting pretty wet, and so it's kind of starting to curl. Not ideal, but since it is taped down, that kind of prevents my water from going absolutely everywhere. So last but not least, I'm gonna put a little more green in there because I don't know if I have enough. But then I'm gonna take my green and fill out the rest of my painting. So here's my green. Since I did it in this order, I'm gonna kind of have like an almost night sky going down to kind of a greeny, grassy landscape. It does not have to be realistic at all. I could have done it the other way and kind of make it a little bit more like surrealist or like a little bit more dreamlike. It's up to you, whatever makes you happy. As long as we're using those color schemes we learned about, you can kind of mix around, have fun, play with it. Let's get a little more of that green. Put it there. Taking my green, blending it up into that blue-green color. And then I'm going to take a clean brush that's damp and mix those two a little bit better to kind of get a better gradient. So now that I have my gradient, I want it to still be kind of wet while I go and do my wet on wet techniques on top. So let's see, my purple might be, no, it's fine. It's wet enough. I'm gonna take my salt. You don't have to use salt. You don't really have to use any of this. We're just showing our different techniques, demonstrating that we've learned something. So I'm actually gonna go and add a little bit more purple to the top because it is a little dry. Clean my brush, dip it in the pigment, put it on my palette, add some water, brush it back over there. So like I said earlier, you can kind of get away with this glazing technique if your colors are a little too dry. Or if they're not dark enough or light enough, whatever you want to do, you can kind of add color on top. So then I'm sprinkling salt. I kind of want to give the effect of like stars in mine, since I did paint the moon. I guess I didn't paint the moon, but I painted like a nighttime landscape. I'm gonna go back in and add a little bit of just plain water to down here. Depending on how wet your paint is, that might blend it and give you a little bit better of a gradient too if you weren't exactly happy with it in the first place. I'm just adding it to make my paper wet so I can get my salt on. And then I'm gonna go and put, ooh, spilled that everywhere. I'm gonna go and take a little dropper of some alcohol, and I'm gonna drop that in my paper too. You may not have alcohol, totally fine, don't have to use it. This alcohol kind of gives it just a little bit, something fun. It could be stars, it could be, I don't know, it could be like fireflies maybe, because it does kind of give like a little ring that kind of looks like light. It could just be some sort of texture on there. What time is it? Okay. I'm also gonna take some saran wrap, because I want to add, ooh, a little bit of something to this sort of bottom area, because I think it looks a little flat. I'm gonna take some saran wrap that I accidentally pulled out of the box. I'm gonna crumple it up a little bit, pull it out a little bit. We can't really see your paper. I'm sorry. It also might help if you like go over my picture and click the pin. That way it'll fill up your whole screen. I'm also recording a video up at the top, so I can post that if you guys need to see something again or see something better later. That might help a little bit. I'm gonna go and push down that saran wrap. So that's pretty much it for this first step. You're doing masking tape on the sides, some sort of resist for either a sun or moon, and you want to make that not in the middle, so I did mine at the top. You might do yours at the bottom. You're going to do your gradient of one of the color schemes you guys talked about, and then you're going to do some sort of like wet on wet technique. You don't have to if you don't want to, but you should, because that way you're demonstrating that you have learned something about watercolors. We're also going to be using dry on dry techniques later, so you can also do some of those too. So if you guys want to keep working, I'm just going to sit on and answer questions if you have them.